Evers. We appreciate your time this afternoon. And now we have Colonel Stephen Buteau. And thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon. Again, my name is Colonel Steve Buteau. My boss compromised my call sign, Bucky, so if you hear that, that's me. First of all, I want to say I'm a second-generation California Guardsman and combat veteran. I want to express my deep gratitude to all of you for what you do to support and advocate on behalf of California veterans, and we really appreciate that, so thank you very much. In my 30 years of service, I've spent a lot of it in personnel recovery and special operations, deployed since 1990 all over the world, dealing with the greatest threat that our generation has seen. But I can tell you that the greatest homeland threat that we face is in the cybersecurity realm. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this today. I've got 5 to 7 slides because I want to make sure that you have time to ask questions. So I'll go through them, but certainly if you have questions, let me know. And if I can't respond today, I'll get you information as soon as possible. Next slide. So the cyber threat is formidable. It's significant, and it's evolving rapidly. It's indiscriminate. So what this slide shows as of August of last year is all the different sectors of our society that are affected by a cyber attack. It could be hacking. It could be a data breach. It could be compromise of financial information, theft of your health information. It could be stolen intellectual property, compromised national security, very grave things, including some of the worst potential threats are those threats that are posed against our critical infrastructure, which could be our power grids, our water supply, other things that are automated. On the bottom of the graph, I'll just highlight that cybercrime is now a $400 billion industry. That violent criminals who go behind bars learn that cybercrime is the way to go, and they come out and they're not, rather than robbing a bank and maybe getting $15,000 to $20,000 of cash, they're involving themselves with a white-collar crime and doing cyber crime and getting much better results, and it's much more difficult for the law enforcement agencies to apprehend these people. California, as the 7th largest economy in the world, is a prime target. So from the Attorney General's data breach report, you can see that 17% of all breaches in the United States took place in California in 2012, and then the number of our data breaches internally increased by nearly 30% the following year. Next slide. So in response to this, the state of California has been leaning very far forward, and the former speaker found some precious dollars to set up a controlled experiment, if you will. We created a cyber network defense team with about $500,000 of funding, and the objective of this team was to go out and provide critical support to the state agencies and departments that have CIOs or CISOs, which would be your information security and information officers, but bring state-of-the-art capabilities that we have because of our federal nexus supporting the nation in cybersecurity, and bring these tools into state government so that we could identify vulnerabilities and threats. This is just an aggregate of 2 quarters of information at the end of last fiscal year, 2014. And what you'll note is that when we go out and look at individual systems, that would be anything with an IP address or a computer on your workstation or connected to the net, in this case the ca.gov enterprise. On average, for the approximately 40 agencies or departments we looked at, we found about 18.4 vulnerabilities per system. Nearly a third of those were in a high-risk category. For a not too sophisticated hacker or someone who wants to do harm to our state or nation, they only need one vulnerability to achieve access into a network. The Attorney General recognizes this, and in her last data breach report, she highlighted the fact that organizations should conduct periodic, assessments, risk assessments, to make sure that the security practices and really the compliance standards are all being met. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Next. So the good news story is that on average, when we make that first visit, by the time we go and do a follow-up visit, we see nearly a tenfold reduction in vulnerabilities. So, and a lot of this is because it's not that the CIOs or the CISOs are not competent; they are. It's not that they don't have the same tools that we have; they do. Many of them do. The difference is that it's no different than having a CPA come in and check your books, or having a tax preparer take a look at your tax return. There's things that an independent, neutral source can identify, and we bring with us a lot of lessons learned from our experiences supporting the federal government to bear. Next slide. There's been a lot of terminology thrown out today about Title 10, 50, 32 state active duty, and I wanted to try to explain why it is that your California Military Department is in the position it is, and why we need to be so involved with cybersecurity. From when we are in state active duty or Title 32 status, as I am today, I work for the governor. He is my commander-in-chief. I have the ability to do things uniquely under the authorities of the governor that I cannot do under the authorities of the president. A good example of this is the Posse Comitatus Act. So we can actively support law enforcement when we're under the authority of the governor, with, of course, the governor's approval. And a great example of this is we just recently developed a memorandum of agreement with the FBI that when they have a critical need for cyber forensics, they will request support, and we will provide them that support to support large operations or a large compromise where they lack the end strength, the manpower to mitigate it. The funding that we get from the federal government supports our training and resources and things that we do in support of the nation, but that funding stops at the Title 32 side. In order for us to do the unique things that we do for the state, we have to have a different funding source. And then what we do currently is not just vulnerability assessment. We do all those services listed on the left. Some of them get very technical, but it's a full tooth-to-tail cybersecurity assessment of risk within an organization. What that does is it postures us so that when there is an incident and they need our help, just like the FBI does, we've already got familiarity. We know the people, we know the technology, and we can go in rapidly and help them recover from their incident. And then following the incident, we have the skills and the expertise from all the other mission areas we do to capture our lessons learned and make sure that that good information, minus all the sensitive stuff, goes out to all the other people in our cybersecurity enterprise, so that they can prepare and be better postured for those threats against them. The reason that the federal government relies on us so much is because we feed from the left. We draw our expertise from civilian industry. I met a gentleman, a staffer, in the elevator on the way down here from your office because we got lost. But his son is in the active duty Army right now and doing an information technology mission. When he gets out, he's going to come back to California. He's going to get a job probably in California's cyber industry. But as part of his continuum of service, he will most likely wind up being a member of the California National Guard. So here we have somebody with national experience who's going to be working in the industry and will be back in the National Guard, and they cannot produce that person in the whole U.S. government. I think they've only filled close to 50% of the cybersecurity positions they have because all the jobs are out here, not on the East Coast. Next slide. This emphasizes that graph that shows where all the venture capital investment in cybersecurity currently resides. And it's no surprise that our cyber footprint in California is going to be leveraging. We already have an Air National Guard unit in Los Angeles. We hope to have a cyber presence in San Diego. We hope to have one in Silicon Valley. And we currently have one in Sacramento. And these are our first-line people who are be working with anyone who has a nexus to state government. It could be a privately owned, critical infrastructure, or a provider, a utility, airport, port authority, because all those things are critical to the economy or the way that our state functions day in and day out. Next. A list of some of our achievements. I'll leave that up there, but I want to end my remarks and take questions.
Do we have questions? Mr. Mathis? No.
Just real quick, it's on here. How does the state currently handle cybersecurity incidents, and who has jurisdiction over what resources are available?
Okay, excellent question. So the jurisdiction is really if it's everything's going to be treated first order as a cyber crime. So the CHP, our state police, if you will, they have the authority, and they need to get in there right away. And a key role, I mentioned posse comitatus earlier, when you bring the Guard in with law enforcement, we understand how to work with them because you can't prosecute a crime if you don't maintain custody of evidence. So the response post-attack has to be highly integrated, and then so they would have jurisdiction, but their authorities will stop at the crime scene. My joke is that they'll show up, put the chalk line around the computer, take some pictures, and then leave, and then the CISO will say, well, what do I do with the body? They say, call the mortician, right? So the thing is that this is a whole of government problem. It requires a unified effort, no one agency or jurisdiction. So now in the case of it being an incident, that incident is, there's a national response framework that requires, if they need support, it goes up through the Office of Emergency Services. So Cal OES is our storefront for all the things that we do supporting the state of California. We can't just respond to something unless it goes through the proper authorities from, it could be a municipal, county, regional to state, but those work through OES. And similarly, if it's someone in the critical infrastructure, they have a similar pathway up through Office of Emergency Services. And the OES is working alongside of us, but they're developing an emergency support function that's dedicated solely to cyber because they recognize how critical a problem this is. Unlike fighting fires or dealing with an earthquake or something else like that, this is a steady state problem. So analysis and prevention is definitely worth the pound of cure here. And so our weight of effort has to be on the prevention side because the consequences of failure are so bad. In 2013, the average cost to remediate, a breached record, like somebody's health information, is close to $200. And if you have tens of thousands or even a million records compromised, you can see how that adds up pretty significantly.
Okay, I had a number of questions. One of them was that you showed the chart with the number of vulnerabilities you detected in one of the departments, and then when you went back, you still have, I guess that's one or two that you discovered again. Are those vulnerabilities that can't be fixed, or are you able to fix them after you?
Well, this is great. So what a lot of this is that when I first got into this whole cybersecurity thing, I was like, we need it to be zero. And I'll tell you, for the California Military Department, I can't tell you the actual number, but it's less than one vulnerabilities per system. The thing is that if I take my laptop off my workstation and go home and I do some work and I come in the next day and I hook back up, most likely the patches and the security updates that were done overnight, they're not going to be on my system. And depending on the priority, they might not do that until the next night. So what's going to happen is just in the course of doing business every day, you're always going to have some low-level white noise of vulnerability. What we do, though, is some of them are, the bulk of them are low risk, and what we want to do is we want to try to mitigate the high-risk ones. And the high-risk ones might be, I don't want to get into a particular case, but if you can imagine that I was a system administrator responsible for, sensitive tax information, and I had privileges that gave me direct access to that tax information. That would be a higher risk than me not having my Symantec or malware update on my system for that evening. So they classify the risk, and then we're trying to work with everybody to mitigate those.
But should there be a standard of 0 high risk and 2 to 5 low risk? I mean, do you set?
Yeah, and
is
it
that
really
what we should be moving toward?
And I want to make sure we emphasize this because this is a key discussion point in cybersecurity. This is all about mitigating risk, and whose risk are we mitigating? Is it the CIO's risk? Is it the department lead's risk? Is it the governor's risk or the legislature's risk? What we've seen, and this is no criticism of California, this is just the way the whole nation is going right now, is a big part of, we assess the risk, but we need to make sure that we're providing the decision makers, the people with the authority to accept the risk, we need to inform them so that they can determine what's acceptable and what's unacceptable. And I think that's a key thing about the sustainment funding and how we make sure that we're doing this to the satisfaction of the people who are setting that bar.
Right, and do you run into we have a lot of old equipment here, and so with all this legacy hardware, are there issues, sensitivities that can't be mitigated? Yes, but the good news is that you can, and yes, we have some antiquated technology, but a lot of industry does too. Certainly our critical infrastructure partners have a lot of dated technology too. It's just a cost of replacement. But that doesn't mean that we can't create a defensive barrier to protect those assets from intrusion or exploitation. So right now, from the military department's perspective, because we're your defense entity, we want to help build that barrier protection first and foremost, and then over time, as you're able to replace the antiquated infrastructure, but then it has to be done in a way that you can always maintain or increase that security posture. You never want it to go back down. You're talking about audits once a year. Is that sufficient? It really depends, and I think that it's going to vary from agency to agency. The most sensitive information really should be subject to continuous monitoring. And then I would say that first of all, I will make some survey results available to you. I just got them this afternoon because we got some feedback from people that we support. Overwhelmingly, more than 70% of the agencies that we support really want and desire our services, and I think a lot of it is because we're a trusted agent. We give them the information they need so they can self-report and advocate and get the resources they need. But I trust the relationship that our teams have with those CIOs and CISOs to determine the frequency with which they think that should be done, and that in terms of the unified effort, that could be validated by the Department of Technology or another an important part of our standardization process to make sure that the risk is appropriate. And obviously you offer a very good solution for state departments, but are there other private entities that can do this type of audit? Yes, absolutely. So the Presidential PPD Policy Directive 21, which was just signed by President Obama 2 years ago, it updated a previous policy directive under President Bush from 2003. But it does a couple things. One is it really enables the National Guard we are first responders for any catastrophic event in the homeland. That's our job, not the active force.
they're a secondary contingency for us because they're fighting our nation's wars. In cybersecurity, we are the first responders in supporting our critical infrastructure. So that could be anything. It could include the privately held entities. If they have a nexus to the state, we can be their support. Southern California Edison is actually going with us to CyberGuard exercise this year in 2015 because we're evolving that partnership. Los Angeles International Airport, the world airports, which includes Ontario and I think Van Nuys, they want desperately for us to come in and support them, as does the Port Authority. We just have to, it's difficult for us to do without the complete system in place so that we can have the reimbursement mechanism or the continuous funding source so we can just go out and do this.